Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well and also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 1 English lesson on, on verb tenses. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once we've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English Language Arts, grade 1, and then we scroll down up until we get to the chapter of verb tenses. All right. So our chapter for today is verb tenses. We said our subject is English Language Arts, grade 1. And the lessons that we are going to be focusing on is to select the sentence that tells about the present, to select the sentence that tells about the past, and to select the sentence that tells us about the future. So when it comes to verb tenses, right, especially if you hear the word tenses, and then your tenses are either your present tense, your past tense, or your future tense. So that is our tenses. Present tense, it is our past tense, and it is our future tense. All right. All right. So English Language Arts. All right. So we said we are focusing on the different tenses in the present, in the past, and in the future. All right. Select the sentence that tells about the present. All right. So we said that when we talk about tenses, right? We said that tenses are either your present tense, it is your past tense, or it is your future tense. So we're going to find out more about how we can identify the verb tenses, for example, either in the present, in the past, or in the future. All right. And remember, when we talk about verb tenses, right, we're talking about the actions that takes place. So verbs is actions that take place. And if we're talking about the different tenses, right, and then it is the action or the things that happens either in the present tense, that happens in the past tense, or things that happens in the future tense. All right. Okay, so if we talk about the present tense, right? Present tense is things that is happening now, right? So whatever you're doing now, that is basically in the present tense. So for example, if you like, let's say I can say that if I look at a sentence, I can say that, for example, let's say Nadine Nadine talks on the phone, right? That is now in the present tense, right? We can say the students listen to their teacher. That is also now in the present tense, right? Another present tense is, for example, we can say um, the boys play with their ball, right? Because these are the things that's basically telling us that is happening now, right? It's the things that is happening now. And one more thing we can maybe say, the girl sings in the choir, right? So these are things or sentences that's in the past tense. That's in the present tense, right? Sentences that's in the present tense. And if we look once again at these four sentences, and then the one says Nadine talks on the phone, the students listen to the teacher, the boys play with the ball. And if we were to identify the verbs in let's say the verbs basically in its specific tense, which is in the present tense, it is talks, it is listen, it is play, it is sings, right? All right. Now if we were to identify if we were to identify now the tense, like in the in the past tense, right? And then I'm going to use that very same sentences, right? But I'm not just going to write it in the past tense. So I'm going to use the very same sentence but in the past tense. And if we were to identify the tense in the past tense, And then we're going to say, for example, I'll type it. Um, all right, so we can then say Nadine talked on the phone, right? So now remember when it comes to present tense, right? And then we add an ed to our verb, and that will basically show the past tense. Sorry, when we show the past tense. So when we show the past tense, and then we use that very same verb, right? But we add ed to that verb to show the tense that is now in the past tense, right? All right, so we're going to use the very same sentence that we have over here, and we're going to say the students in the past tense. We can say the students listened, and we add ed to their teacher. All right, so that is now in the past tense. The students listened to their teacher. If you look at the next sentence, right, that says the boys play with the ball, that's in the present tense. And in the past tense, we can say the boys, remember we said we add an ed to a verb, we can say the boys played with their ball. All right. And if we look at the last one, right, the present tense says the girl sings in the choir, right? So we can then say the girl now changes sang. So you don't say singed, sang in the choir. All right. So if we were to identify our verbs in the past tense, and then it will be listened, then we have talked, played, and sang, because we don't say singed, right? So we don't say singed, but we say sang. All right. So far, this is present tense. I'm going to put here present tense. Here we have past tense. All right, and when it comes to future tense, right? Then with our future tense, we add will in front of our verb, right? We add will in front of our verb. So we will say, for example, Nadine will talk on the phone. The students will listen to their teacher. The boys will play with the ball. The girls will sing in the choir. So with the future tense, all we do is we add will in front of the verb, right? All right. And if we look at the future tense, then we can say, sorry. All right, so we can say Nadine will talk on the phone, right? So that is now our future tense, will talk. If you look at the second sentence, the second sentence says the students listen to the teachers, so we can say the students will listen to the teacher. And if you look at the next one, it says the boys play with the ball, so we say the boys will play with the ball. And if you look at the last one, and then we can say the girl, referring to one girl, the girl will sing in the choir. So these are our present tense. There we have our past tense, and that is how we write it if we were to write it in the future tense. With the future tense, we said we add will in front of our verb. So will talk, will listen, will play, and will sing. Right? All right, so now we're going to aplusstudents.ca, and there we are going to select the sentence that tells us about the present, the past, and the future. All right, then if we look at the first one that says tells us about the present, right? It says some verbs that tell us about something that has already happened, right? And something that has already happened, right? So something that has already happened, these are the basically verbs that tells us something that happened in the past, right? So these verbs, they tell us about the past. It's things that happened already. Anything that happened this afternoon, anything that happened this morning, anything that happened last night, yesterday, last week, last month, last year, it's in the past, right? And whenever we want to show or identify a verb, right, that's in the past tense, then we need to add ed to our verb. And if we look at an example, it says we walked, there we add ed, to the store yesterday. The show started last week, so ed is added, right? And then if we were to add if we want some of our words that tells us about something that is happening now. So anything that tells us that's happening now, like me, like I talk, you listen, play, dance, sing, right? Those are things that's happening now, right? And the verbs that tells us about something that is happening now is in the present, right? It's in the present tense. And with the present tense, right, it usually has no ending or it ends with an S. So with our verb, if you refer to one person doing something, right, if one person does something and then our verb ends with an S, if more than one person does something, then our verb does not end with an S. For example, we, more than one person, walk to school today, right? So walk to school today with no S because it tells us about something that's happening now. The parade starts now. It's a parade, it's one parade. Starts and it ends with an S. Now. And then we have some of our verbs that tells us something about that, something that is going to happen. It tells us about something that is going to happen. And these verbs, they tell us about the future. Anything that is going to happen later, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. It will happen, right? And that is in the future tense. And with the future tense, we use the word will in front of our verb, right? And if you look at examples, right, it says we will walk to the park next week. You see will in front of our verb. The party will start soon. So will is basically tells us about something that it's that's going to still happen, right? All right, so now we're going on to our test where we are going to identify the present tense. Keeping in mind, remember we said that if we refer to one person doing something, our verb ends with an S. If more than one person is doing something in the present tense, then our verb do not end with an S. So you specifically gonna have to look at the verb, right? So look at the verb. Which sentence tells us about the present? Something that is happening now. Is it she thinks about her trip all the time? Or we will paint our room blue? Or we were going to go to the pool? Or do we say, I washed the dishes? We need to select the sentence that tells us about the present. Which option tells us about the present? All right, and if we were to identify our present tense, right, or the sentence that's in the present tense, then yes, we are going to choose the first option. It says she thinks about her trip all the time. It's something that she's doing now all the time. So well done. Option one is correct. All right, it says we need to still tell about the present tense, right? The present tense, something that is happening now. Do we say I will walk to the zoo? Option two, I live in that yellow house. Option three, he walked the dog. Or option four, Robin will be joining us. Present tense, the present tense, something that is going to happen now, the present tense. Remember, we said the past tense, we add will in front, so present tense. All right, and if we choose the present tense, then we will go to option two. I live in that yellow house. It's something that you're doing now, right? So well done. Live is correct. Remember, we are still doing the present tense, right? Liz and her friends jump high. I will talk to Nina. She lived in Paris. They watched that movie at the cinema. We need to identify the sentence that tells us about the present. All right. And if we were to choose the sentence that tells us about the present, right? And then we will identify option 1, right? Liz and her friends jump high. It's something that they're doing now. They jump high. All right. Which sentence tells about the present? Something that is happening now, right? She pulled a rabbit out of her hat. John was lost in the ocean. Our dog wags his tail. I walked home from school often. So, which option tells us about the present? Something that is happening now, the present tense. All right. And if we were to identify or select the sentence that tells us about the present, and then we're going to option 3, which is our dog wags his tail, right? Something that the dog is doing now. All right, so now we are going to go on to the next one where we're going to select the sentence that tells about the past. And remember, we said that when there's a sentence that tells us about the past, then the verb ends with an ed, right? Our verb ends with an ed. For example, walked, started, talked, laughed, danced, jumped, right? It is things that happened in the past, right? All right, so we're going to our test. We need to say which sentence tells about the past. Is it option 1? The party just started. We will work very hard. The dog is barking. Or grandma will make the cake. We need to select or identify the sentence that tells us about the past tense. All right. If we were to identify the sentence that tells us about the past, right, then we're going to select option one. And yes, option one is correct. So well done. Option one is correct. Which sentence tells about the past? Is it option one? They ride their bikes to the store. Option two, we left at the silly picture. Option three, he will walk to the party. Option four, grandma is making dinner now. We need to select the sentence that tells us about the past. All right, and if we were to identify our sentence that's in the past, right, something that happened already, and then we're going to say it's option two. We laughed at the silly picture. Option two, it's laughed. Remember, we see that the verb ends with an ed. All right, sentences that's in the past. I hear people at the door. Option two, she loved my song about animals. Option three, grandpa is fishing. Or option four, we will take the dog to the vet tomorrow. All right, and if we were to identify our sentence that's in the past tense, then yes, we will choose option two, which is she loved my song about animals. Well done. Option two is correct. All right, it says which sentence tells about the past? Is it option one that says Sal stopped the ball with his foot? Option two, the children dig with their hands. Option three, we are going to the park. Or option four, dinner will be served shortly. We need to say which option tells us about the sentence that tells us about the past. All right. And if we were to identify the sentences that tells us about the past, then we will say Sal stopped the ball with his foot. So stopped, because remember we said that in the past our verbs ends with an ed. Stopped. All right. Now we're going on to the next one that says select the sentence that tells about the future, right? And remember we said that when it comes to the future tense, right? Some verbs they tell us about something that is going to happen. Anything that's going to happen later, tomorrow, the next day, next week, next month, right? Even over the weekend, because it's not weekend yet, right? Next year. Those are things that's going to happen in the future, right? It did not happen yet. It is going to happen, and that is in the future. And when it comes to the future tense, right, then these verbs they will tell us about the future, and then we will use the word will in front of our verb to show that there is something that's going to happen in the future tense. It's going to happen in the future, right? So we add will in front of the verb. And here we have an example where we say, we will walk to the park next week. Will walk. The party will start soon. We will dance. We will sing, right? Jane will laugh at the clown, right? So those are future tense, and we add the word will in front of our verb. All right, and now we're going on to our test where we are going to say which sentence tells us about the future. And remember, we put will in front of our verb. Is it option one? Deb opens the pink box. Option two, we will eat outside. Option three, Jane ate the last piece of cake. Or option four, Jack is swimming with Megan. All right. And if we were to choose the correct option, right, we will say option two, we will eat outside. So will eat outside, right? So we put will in front of our verb. All right, so two is correct. Which sentence tells us about the future? Option one, we will watch Nina's game. Option two, dad laughs with his sister. Option three, Jane made dinner for us last week. Or option four, Mike eats his croissants. We need to choose which sentence tells us about the future. right, and if we choose the correct option that tells us about the future, we would go with option one that says we will watch Nina's game. We will watch, and that is in the future. All right, the next one says we need to choose the which sentence tells us about the future. Mike travels by plane. I hear birds outside. The kitten will drink water from the basin. The bunnies ate all the carrots. We need to say which sentence tells about the future. All right, and if we were to select the sentence in the future tense, then we will go with option three. The kitten will drink water from the dish. All right, so that is now the end of our lesson on verb tenses. And remember, we said that the word tense alone, without the verb tense, tells us that a sentence is either in the present, in the past, or in the future, right? And when we say verb tense, then we are talking specifically about the action that either takes place in the present, in the past, or in the future, because that is our verb tenses, right? If we look at the tenses, or let's say sentences that tells us about the present, it tells us about things that is happening now, right? And our verb usually ends with an s if we're referring to one person doing the action, or we don't add an s if more than one person is doing the action. If sentences tells us about the past, right, and then it means that it is things that happened already, right, and our verb ends with an ed. And then if the sentences that tells about the future, then it means that it is things that is going to happen, right? And with our sentences that tells us about the future tense, we add will in front of our verb to show that things are going to happen. All right, so that is the end of our lesson on verb tenses that tells us about the present, past, or future. Thank you very much, grade ones, for joining the class, and I really hope that you're going to have a good day further. Till next time, goodbye.